Another very important tool in our web developer toolkit is the loop. What the loop does is allows us to reuse lines of code without having to write them over and over again. And we can set them for a certain number of times, or we can set it to run while a condition is waiting to be met. So the most fundamental one of all is the for loop. So we're going to take a look at that now, also known as the incrementer loop, and we'll see why. So here's the basic structure of the for loop. Start off with the keyword for. So far, so good. Inside here in the parentheses are conditions for running. There's 3 of them, and I'll get to that in a minute. Outside of that is our left curly brace. And further down we have our right curly brace, which forms a code block. So inside the code block is the code we want to run multiple times based on the condition here. Now, for the 3 languages, C#, PHP, and JavaScript, what goes in here is going to have different syntax. So we're going to focus on the structure of the for loop itself, because this will be similar, if not identical, for all of the programming languages. But in here is the code to run each loop. So up here in our condition parentheses, as I mentioned before, are 3 parts. The first part is the starting point. I equals 0. So we've got a variable I here, and that's very common to give it the name I, short for incrementer. It doesn't have to be I, but that's traditionally the variable that we use. So I'm setting it to 0. That's the starting point. Now we put a semicolon here, which we haven't seen yet. So what's happening in here is not just 3 parts, but actually 3 mini statements inside the parentheses. So the first part is our starting point. I is equal to 0. The second part is our running condition. I is less than 10. So, as long after each loop runs, if I is still less than 10, do another loop. So, as it is right now, this loop would run forever if we didn't tell it when to stop. So that's what the third part of the statement is. I'm just going to make some more room here. Starting point, running condition. You can think of it as a mini if statement. And then the third part, I equals I plus 1. If we didn't change the value of I, the loop would run forever. So the third part is what's going to change the value of I after the loop runs. So as the code executes, when it gets to the for loop, I is 0. If I is less than 10, and it is because it's 0, do the thing inside here. When it's done, I will now equal I plus 1. So the first time it runs, it's 0. After it, 0 gets incremented or added to 1. So now it's 1. And the loop continues. Is I less than 10? Yes, it's 1. Okay, do this thing again. Then increment it to 2. So that's the 3 parts there of the for loop. The values start at the beginning, the running condition, or you can think of it as an if statement, and the method to change our incrementer variable so that it doesn't run forever. So it lets us set the number of times that it's going to run. So in this structure, it allows us to create lines of code that we want to run multiple times without having to code it multiple times. And that's the power of using loops.